Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. Public media funding is on the line. That means trusted interviews and important conversations like the ones you hear on Idaho Matters could be in jeopardy. Act now at boisestatepublicradio.org/funding. Help protect the journalism you count on. I'm Gemma Gaudette. More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. Over the last 2 weeks, archaeologists and students, as well as volunteers, have been digging into Idaho's history, and I mean this literally. Less than a year ago, renovations on Boise's landmark assay office accidentally uncovered hundreds of artifacts. Well, now, with the excavation project at an end, there are lots of new finds to dust off. So, joining us to talk more about this and about what they discovered are anthropology professors Mark Warner and Renee Campbell, both with the University of Idaho. Nice to have you on the program.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Gemma. Good to talk with you again.
Nice to talk with you too. So, as we mentioned, this initial project started really unexpectedly last year. So, Mark, maybe I can start with you. How did your team decide where you wanted to target and dig this time around? Because you've done this in Boise before, Mark.
Yep, this is actually, I think, the sixth project we've done in Boise, and I think the fourth that Renee and I have done. We did this because we had a cheat sheet this time. When they were doing some construction work on the grounds of the State Preservation Office, they found these hundreds of artifacts, and so they were very excited to have us come down and do more work, and we knew where the materials were, so we basically came down and said, let's go excavating right where the trash pit was.
So, Renee, give us a little bit of background on this old building that you guys all went to start looking at what was found.
Sure. It is in downtown Boise. It's the historic U.S. Assay Office. So that would have been the place that during Idaho's early mining booms, folks were bringing metals out of the hills into town to get tested for purity. So it was a very busy place, pretty critical to Idaho's earliest industry in the 1870s. It opened about 1871, and an assayer and his family, a series of them, lived there up until about 1930. So there was a long period of time when it was operating as both a business and a home. And then after that, the U.S. Forest Service moved into it and they reestablished it as an office building. And then after the U.S. Forest Service moved out, it's now currently the home to the State Historic Preservation Office.
And this dig really served as kind of a field school for a lot of students. Can you guys tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I guess I'll start with this one. An important part of becoming archaeologists is field training. And one of the things we've realized over the years is it's hard for Idaho students to go off to some exotic locale and dig, for 6 weeks in some place like Greece or Rome or wherever. So we've been trying to do a lot of very locally based projects, and they've been very popular with our students. And so we had 9 students come in participating in this for field credit, for academic credit, giving them hands-on training in being an archaeologist. But we also sort of made a point of making sure this was available to anybody who wanted to participate as well. And it was done in a short stint, so it wasn't inconveniencing students by having to take a month off or 6 weeks off from their summer jobs.
So, Renee, why is this type of really local hands-on experience so important in particular for students?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons. First of all, as Mark mentioned, it's just a lot easier for a broader range of students to be able to fit something like this into their schedules if they don't have to travel super far from home and if they don't have to take a big break from their studies. But it also lets them learn about the history that's right around them in their own communities. And it's history that folks can really connect to. And that's the same with us trying very hard to get the public involved. It's the community history that we're exploring, and so it's really important for us to also bring that history to the community.
Mark, can you talk to us a little bit about the Idaho Public Archaeology? My understanding is what this is like your 10th project?
Yep. Yeah, and it's run by myself, Renee Campbell, and our colleague Katrina Eichner. And we've been sort of self-branded ourselves as Idaho Public Archaeology, making a pretty explicit commitment to do Idaho's history with Idaho's students and sharing it with Idaho citizens. And our first project was about 13 years ago with the Cyrus Jacobs House. And subsequent to that, we've done like 6 projects in Boise, one up in Coeur d'Alene, 2 or 3 in Moscow. It's a chance to sort of share archaeology with the citizens of the state.
So, Mark, my understanding too, if I remember correctly, so I'm going to try to go back a long way. You have found some really interesting archaeological items during these digs in Boise. And I don't know if you can remember any off the top of your head, but can you kind of give folks a sense of really what you've uncovered during these digs in Boise? Because it's pretty fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. The short answer, well, to preface that, people don't think about history. They think about written history, but they don't think about the material history that people leave behind. And what these projects do is tell us an awful lot about the realities of life 50, 100, 200 years ago. And we find just stuff that's very mundane, like the remains of their meals that people ate. But we also find the little things that humanize the past. For instance, in this project we just had, most of the materials were work related, but we also found doll parts and small little frozen Charlotte doll, which was undoubtedly the toys from the daughters who were living upstairs in the assay office.
Mm.
We find materials from imported from Europe. We find materials imported from all over the place that gives us a more nuanced understanding of everyday life in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, and so on. And it's stuff that people don't record. It's just the minutia that collectively
Hmm.
tells a lengthy story about how people lived.
So, Renee, with that said, what can you learn about people's day-to-day lives by looking at these artifacts?
Yeah, this project in particular, we can hopefully learn a lot both about, as I mentioned, the gold industry in Idaho, what that looked like on the local level, but also about the lives of the folks who are living in the assay office. And we can tell things like what types of foods they were eating, where they were buying their products from, what sort of materials were coming in and out of Boise, but also sort of the array of people that were involved in their daily lives. You can see the connections between communities. It's really interesting. Mark and I have done a number of these projects now and in different parts of Boise, and inevitably there's some sort of overlap between one project and another. So you can kind of build out that sort of underlying fabric of the community through these material connections between folks.
Hmm. Mark, why do you think there are so many artifacts that were buried in this particular location?
That's people were messy. It's what
Okay.
I mean in a nutshell. And people don't think about how important infrastructure is. And you didn't get indoor plumbing, you didn't get water piped into a house, you didn't get public services picking up the trash until the late 19th, early 20th century. And so you're left to your own devices to deal with that. In this case, the assay office folks had a lot of space around them, and I think a big chunk of that, one of those side yards, was where they were throwing out their household trash, throwing out their work trash, and cleaning out the cinders from their assaying work. And I think we've documented
Okay.
that.
So with that said, then, I mean, you sit here and you think, oh my gosh, just like, I don't think we could imagine just throwing all of our garbage into a side yard these days, right? However, for what you do as archaeologists, I mean, is this kind of just a boon then when you have a site like this?
Absolutely.
Renee and I go, oh, this is another fun project. This is going to be great. And the two of us just kind of rub our hands and say, here we go.
Another person's trash pile to an archaeologist. That's our gold mine right there.
I was gonna say, right? You must get the biggest smile on your face when you hear about all of this old trash. I mean, seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, that was actually when I think we first saw a news story on this. We're friends with the people in the state preservation office now, and we
Mhm.
just said, hey, we'll be happy to work with you on that. And they said, absolutely. We don't have the labor to deal with this. So the stuff they found last year in the preliminary work has already come up to the University of Idaho. And we have a graduate student, Jade Payne, working on this for her master's thesis. And it was the catalyst for us galvanizing to do another project down there, knowing full well we have a whole lot of interesting things that's gonna come out of the ground there.
So, what do these objects kind of tell us about the history of this area, Renee? I mean, what can you glean from these artifacts?
Well, certainly in this collection, we can see a lot of, the day-to-day routines of running an assay office. We can tell from how much charcoal and cinders we found that they were running those furnaces that were part of the assaying process all day, every day. We can see how much material they were going through. A lot of the small ceramics that are used in the process are single use, so we just have an incredible number of those. They would use them once and throw them out. But then we also get this nice little portrait of what it was like to live in Boise during that time period. We can see, as Mark mentioned, little remnants of the children that were probably playing in the big yard. We've also dug in an area of the yard where we know the family would take lunches and hang out in hammocks and sort of enjoy the big trees that were planted on the property. And because the assay office was on this large piece of property, it was also a place where different folks from the community would come and spend time and recreate. And so we can also pick up on little bits of that community life as well as the personal stuff.
I mean, I think what's really fascinating is when you envision where this site is, right? In such a really kind of prominent area in downtown Boise. I mean, Mark, it does take you back. I mean, Renee talking about those big trees because it's always shaded there, right? I mean, no matter how hot it gets in the summertime, that area is just it's so well shaded. There's the old building right there. I mean, you're almost already transported back. I mean, do you kind of get that same feeling when you're on site physically?
Well, our feeling was digging in Boise in the summertime with all that shade. This is a very cushy project. you know, we were telling students it's usually not this cushy, in terms of having this level of convenience. But I mean, to
Is-
your point, that's the magic of archaeology is you do start, you know, re-envisioning what the past was like for people living in
yeah.
Boise 100 years ago. And that's a very lovely
So,
space we were digging in, but it actually would have been a fairly dirty space 130 years ago there.
huh, that's so fascinating. So, Renee, what's next for these artifacts?
So they've all been transported back up to the University of Idaho. We're going to go through and carefully clean them and catalog them and then do some background research on them over the next year or so. We will hopefully get some more students involved in that. So that's a training opportunity for the students up here during the school year. And then we've also been partnering with the chemistry department to do some initial testing of these artifacts that can tell us more about what specific materials were being used in them. And that again is through another lab that engages a bunch of students. So there's a lot of student training that'll come out of this as we kind of research them before eventually returning them to Boise, to the State Historic Preservation Office.
So, Mark, before I let you go, any more plans to dig on these particular grounds or any other projects coming up in the Treasure Valley?
Well, Renee, Kat, and I are always interested in sort of interesting places where we can share Idaho's history with Idaho citizens through through archaeology. That's one of the appeals of these projects we've done in Boise. We could certainly come back to the assay office, but we're always keeping our eyes out for other projects. And we always encourage people to sort of be aware of what's beneath their feet when people start building new buildings and so on, and give archaeologists a chance to gather a little bit more history of from Boise and other cities in the state. So yeah, we'd like to be back at the assay office, but we're open to lots of other things too.
Well, I want to thank both of you for coming in and talking more about this. Really appreciate the conversation. We've been speaking with anthropology professors Mark Warner and Renee Campbell, both from the University of Idaho, talking about a recent dig in Boise. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.